He killed a few children. He was never the same again.
Having depersonalized the victims, the Nazis now depersonalize the method of killing, when Death's Head continues. Murder is to be more anonymous, less stressful for the murderers. The use of poison gas is taught at this training center in Oranienburg. One of the trainees here is Hans Stark.
My brother came to Auschwitz and met Commandant Höss, who asked him what his profession was. And he said he was at school, at high school. And Höss said, "That's excellent. You can be in charge of admissions." So there was my brother, 17 years of age, head of the admissions section.
By the age of 17, he is a master of life and death.
The top SS men in Auschwitz were relatively young people who had risen quickly in the ranks because they were, in the eyes of their superior officers, good material. That meant they could make a career for themselves quickly. You mustn't forget that in those days, people thought the Reich would last for 1,000 years. Now, that's a long time, and it's a fine thing to be in a high position.
A high position in a Reich that brings out the evil in people.
Stark never showed any pity. On the contrary, he used to mock the people who pleaded for mercy on the ramp. He acted as if the whole thing were a schoolboy prank. How could an educated person be so brutal?
During the summer of 1943, a film club organizes an outing to Dachau in Bavaria. The concentration camp guards join in their football game. Do the visitors know what is going on nearby? Or do they simply approve?
I can't blame every single person and say you all knew what was going on in Auschwitz and what was going on in Treblinka. But what went on here in the German Reich, everyone could see that. Every German person saw clearly that the synagogues were burned down in their cities and that the Jews around them were rounded up and taken away one day.
Hans Frankenthal is transported to Auschwitz-Birkenau. The Death's Head troops are waiting for the train.
The train hadn't even come to a complete standstill when the doors of the wagons were pulled open, and then they started yelling and screaming at us, "Out, out, out, luggage to be left in the wagons." So we jumped out, and then came the order. Men to the right, women with children to the left, women without children far left.
During the war, thousands of SS men serve in the murder factories.
How could people who normally lived quite inconspicuous lives, who were not sadists, I mean, there were sadists in Auschwitz, but not many of them, how could they work in an atmosphere like that and be involved in mass murder on a daily basis?
Dividing people into those of value and those of no value is the basis of madness.
There are members of the master race, and then there are subhuman creatures. People are divided into races not on the basis of history, but in the language used at the time on the basis of blood. People accepted these ideas. This ideology poisons people, corrupts them. You are a member of the master race. Great, you can benefit from it. You can be a Führer yourself, even if it is on a small scale. And this corruption works.
We are the chosen ones. We are allowed to do this, even though it is hard. We are saving the German people from the hereditary enemy, the Jews. You see, that's how it is. Everyone was motivated by Himmler's speeches when he said, "You are doing the most difficult duty that a soldier can ever be asked to perform. The Jews are to be exterminated here, and the Jews are our misfortune. And you will all be able to say you were part of this, you endured, you were so brave that you did everything necessary."
These men are rewarded for their cruelty.
They promoted the little men when they obediently beat people up. They gave them special leave when they did what was expected of them. That was the evil mechanism at work.
A uniform turns normal men into killers.
When I helped Schwarzhuber off with his boots and his jacket to clean them, he was left there in his underwear, and he looked like nothing special at all. They were like nothing at all when they didn't have their uniforms on. They were nothing. Nothing. As the French say, rien du tout. And when I helped him on with his jacket, and he put on his boots and his cap, he was a monster again. That was a crazy thing about them. All of a sudden, they thought they ruled the world.
The Warsaw Ghetto stages an uprising when Death's Head continues on the History Channel. Spring 1943. The Warsaw Ghetto in Poland is to be cleared out. Thousands of people will be transported to death camps. Despite being virtually powerless, they want to send a message to the SS. They stage an uprising.
When the uprising began, none of us imagined we would survive. Our aim was something quite different. It was the last opportunity to take revenge on the SS for years of murder.
SS Brigadier Jürgen Stroop documents the suppression of the uprising. He wants to leave a memorial to himself.
Stroop is speaking like of a normal operation, like of a military operation. They were not only killers, because to come and to take people who are in hiding, which are hungry, which are in the last days of their life.
Stroop believes his actions are honorable.
He was a person who always wanted to get on, to get promoted. Someone who would boast about every Jew who was deported or killed. Someone who liked to go on about how brave his men were and how perfectly he'd led them on missions. That was his way of furthering his career.
His career began in Detmold in Westphalia. Stroop was a civil servant in the Land Registry Office before he joined the SS in 1933. He regarded the nearby memorial to an ancient victory of the Germanic tribes over the Romans as a symbol of the New Age. In the spirit of the time, he launched on a career that would have been unthinkable otherwise. From civil servant to SS general. He later claims he was only obeying orders.
He said he was loyal in obeying the orders of his superior officers, and his ultimate superior was Adolf Hitler. Hitler demanded all those things from him, and he just obeyed orders.
Orders and obedience. Even in Auschwitz, these are the catchwords. There is a system behind it all, and many people helped devise that system. People like Arthur Liebehenschel. 10 years after joining the SS, he is appointed Commandant of Auschwitz in 1943.
I knew he was working in Auschwitz, but he never said anything about it. I just thought he was working there, that's all.
He had previously worked in Oranienburg in the shadow of the Sachsenhausen concentration camp. The Liebehenschels' children played just a stone's throw from the camp.
My father was a very loving father. I used to get up at the same time as him every morning, and I can still see his hands when he would spread some honey on a piece of bread for me. Now and then I was allowed to go with him when his chauffeur picked him up, and I'd stay in the back of the car when he got out at T-Block, where he worked.
In the concentration camp administrative office, Liebehenschel is second in command. The genocide is run from behind the desk. In November 1943, Liebehenschel is transferred to Auschwitz. Now the killer behind his desk is confronted by the scene of his crimes.
Liebehenschel was a typical civil servant. He was always walking around inspecting something. I never saw him hit a prisoner. He was a gentle person. And I have to say, in some way, he was a completely normal man.
The truth of Auschwitz catches up with him.
He was in a bad way. He suffered terribly. I know all this from his second wife, who told us about it. When a new transport came in, he had to go down and watch. Oh my God, he used to say, women and children too. And then she told us how he would go home and stand under the shower for ages, as if he had to wash off all the filth. And then she would often suggest they went out for a walk in the fresh air.
But he does nothing to stop it.
He was never violent, and he was softer than the others. But he was a criminal too, just like all the rest, because he also took part in the selection procedure at the ramp.
He was involved from the very start, which means he knew all along what was going on. I mean, he was just sitting behind the desk, yes, but then if I work in a situation like that, I must know what is happening. And there's no doubt at all that when he went to Auschwitz, he really saw what suffering was taking place.
When Death's Head continues, the world learns the horrifying truth of the Nazi war crimes. When the Auschwitz concentration camp is liberated on January 27, 1945, the whole world learns that millions have been murdered. Most of the murderers have vanished. But the victims are there to bear witness.
I had been a liberator of many concentration camps as a soldier in the American armies. I had seen the product of mass murder in Buchenwald, in Ebensee, in Mauthausen. I certainly was shocked by that experience. I was traumatized by that experience, which has not left me to this day.
Pictures of the atrocities are seen all around the world. The same question is always asked. What kind of people could have done this to other human beings? Dachau. The rage is directed against young guards who had been left to hold the fort.
The most important characteristic that I looked for was men of education and intelligence. I didn't want to have as a defendant some poor soldier that was ordered to go out and commit some criminal act and didn't realize what he was doing.
Now come the excuses.
My reasoning was that if they were educated men, they would have been aware of the criminality and the magnitude of the crimes they were committing.
Nuremberg, 1947. The leaders of the SS special squads are on trial. They are responsible for over 1 million deaths.
I would have felt quite different about them if anyone had ever said he was sorry. They never said they were sorry, because they were not sorry. They were sorry they lost the war.
In Landsberg prison, 14 death sentences are passed by the judges in the trial of the SS special squads. 4 are carried out. None of those convicted show any remorse. One of them writes, "Discipline and loyalty have brought me to the gallows. To this day, I still do not know how else I was supposed to have behaved."
This was the tie which bound all of them. Opera singers, lawyers, economists, architects. Another thing they had in common, they were all prepared to commit mass murder for their ideals without any hesitation or any regret.
In Dachau, where it all began, prisoners were tortured and murdered for 12 years. Now, senior SS men, their executioners, are imprisoned here, including Arthur Liebehenschel. When questioned, he maintains his innocence. He is placed on trial in Krakow, Poland.
At the very end, I believe, he came to terms with it. He knew what was going to happen. He wrote us a farewell letter, and right at the bottom it said, "I have just heard the verdict, the death sentence."
Frankfurt, 1964. After years of evading justice, SS men from Auschwitz are on trial, including Hans Stark.
Die Sitzung und Verhandlung des Schwurgerichts am Landgericht in Frankfurt am Main ist eröffnet.
Up to that moment, my brother hadn't said a word to his wife or family about having served in Auschwitz. And when he was finally arrested in Cologne, and his wife looked at him absolutely incredulously, he just said, it was about something that happened during the war.
Something that happened during the war is single-handed murder in at least 44 cases. Hans Stark denies the charge.
The thing I simply can't forgive is that he always refused to admit what actually happened, though he was one of the people who caused it.
At the time of his crimes, Hans Stark was still a minor. He is charged according to juvenile law and is sentenced to 10 years in prison. A child of his time.
Führer, order us, we shall follow you. Can lead to Auschwitz. The concept of a leader, a Führer, must never be accepted. Blind obedience to a leader can never be adopted as a defining identity. Everyone must accept responsibility for whatever he does, even in critical situations. This is something that still applies today.
Tonight on the History Channel. Experience the danger.
Everything that could go wrong did go wrong.
Battle the elements.
We lost our sonar.
Discover the truth. Titanic. High tech at low depth. Tonight at 9 on the History Channel.